So, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of people don't know this, but I'm going to break it down for you. Why did Larry Robinson stay with the Montreal Canadiens when he moved up to the big club in the early 1970s? Well, they made a decision, ladies and gentlemen. They had to make a choice between Larry Robinson and this player to be kind of the number 3 or number 4 rear guard for the Habs. Now, Bob Murdoch, a very dependable defenseman and ended up being a very good NHL coach for a number of years, hailed from Kirkland Lake, Ontario, and became recognition a little bit, not only for his play in the juniors or like the minor leagues, but he was part of Team Canada or whatever Team Canada team was put together after they decided not to play in the World Championships under Father Bauer. Now, his 2 years with Team Canada drew heavy attention. He eventually, although he wasn't drafted by the Montreal Canadiens, he had played with Canada's national team in 1969 and 1970, but he eventually ended up getting a short tryout with the Montreal Voyageurs in the 1970 season. Now, by 1971, he had a great year that year with the Voyageurs with 8 goals and 20 assists in 66 games. And after one game with the big team where he had 2 assists, he eventually saw some playoff time as a kind of a replacement for injury. And with only 13 games of NHL and minor pro and junior experience, he ended up being on the Stanley Cup in 1971, where Montreal outlasted Boston and Minnesota and Chicago. Now, by the 1971-72 season, Montreal was still trying to figure out if they're going to keep Murdoch. He had played with the Voyageurs most of that year, only skated in 11 games with 2 points. But the 1972-73 season, he got a regular shift with Montreal, skating in 69 games for Montreal in the regular season and 13 points in the playoffs. So, ladies and gentlemen, he's only 4 years in the pros. He's on 2 Stanley Cup winners of Montreal already. But Montreal made a heavy decision. They're going to go with Robinson and Lapointe and Savard as the big 3, with Bouchard and Laperriere still in the mix. He eventually found his way to the LA Kings, and he had a not too bad career with LA. He played parts of 6 seasons in total. Best year was 1974-75, where he actually played the NHL All-Star game with a grand total of 42 points that year, including 13 goals and 29 assists. Now, eventually ended up with Atlanta Flames, who later moved to Calgary, and again, a very consistent offensive and defensive defenseman. Played 757 games in the NHL regular season with 270 points with 60 goals. Occasionally would go for the rough stuff, but played in 69 playoff games with 4 goals, 18 assists for 22 points. Now, after his NHL player and career was done, he became the head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks the year before Mike Keenan showed up. Now, in that 87-88 season, he ended up with a 30-41-9 record, and during the 89-90 season, he was named head coach of the Winnipeg Jets. After missing the playoffs the previous seasons, the Jets went 37-32-11 for 84 points and were third in the Smythe division, but eventually lost the eventual Stanley Cup champion Edmonton Oilers in 7 games. And he won the NHL Coach of the Year, well-deserved that year. Now, despite the success of the previous season, the Jets struggled in 1991, finishing in the cellar and missing the playoffs, and Murdoch was eventually fired by and replaced by John Paddock. Now, Murdoch would become an associate coach for the San Jose Sharks for their 92 and 93 seasons, and afterwards he eventually ended up in Europe and has since coached several teams in Germany's Dell League. Now, considering all he has done as a coach and as a player, to have 2 Stanley Cups, to have a Jack Adams Award, to be an NHL All-Star, to play with the Montreal Canadiens, to play to coach for 2 of the most respected franchises of the 1980s in Chicago and Winnipeg. He's never talked about that often, but I remember my dad telling me in the 1973 season, you know, they're going to have to make a decision. They're either going to play him or trade him. And him being sent to the Kings strengthened that franchise. Marcel Dion was there, and Dion always said Murdoch was a very dependable defenseman. And, you know, he had probably one of the nicest mustaches of the 1970s. From that alone, he was a handsome man. Women were crazy for him in Montreal. But in LA, he became kind of a marquee idol. But what you saw is what you got with Don Murdoch, because, you know, he had, when you're winning 2 cups early, and, you know, where you can't be that final cog in the Montreal Canadiens, you know, defensive stalwarts. And he, you know, he just wasn't good enough to unseat Laperriere and Robinson, because they made a decision. And did he make the right decision? I say yes. Because Lapointe, Savard, and Robinson brought each of their styles to the table. Murdoch, later on, they had like Brian Engblom, Nyrop, Langley could play that role. And don't forget, they had Rick Chartrand. A little bit of person can drop the gloves. But keeping Robinson, Savard, Lapointe, Laperriere, Pierre Bouchard, you know, there was no room for Murdoch in Montreal. And, you know, the French aspect was Robinson was a bilingual English player. They wanted to keep most of the great players of the 70s francophone. Montreal at the time had the best francophone players of the 1970s, besides, of course, Robert, Martin, and Perreault, and Dion. But like I said, having the Montreal Canadiens of the 1970s, when someone like Don Murdoch couldn't get a final spot in the team, that's how loaded the Montreal Canadiens was. And don't forget, this is a team that traded John Van Doxmeer, or let him go. You know, couldn't make room for Glenn Goldup, Chuck Arneson, Ranson, wherever you pronounce it, Bobby Sheehan, Mark Tardif, Danny Grant, Réjean Houle, Rochefort, you know, the players that couldn't make Montreal. See, at the time, in 1970, Montreal had 35 NHL quality players on the team. 15 were the minors and 20 was on the big team. So either the spot dutied or eventually traded. I mean, look at Guy Charon too as well. He couldn't make it. But Danny Grant, he's scoring 50 goals, showed that was a mistake. I think they should have kept Danny Grant. But, you know, neither here nor there. So on this COVID Thursday, we wish everybody a great weekend. A big scandal rocking Canada with Margaret Trudeau getting a patronage job to her son with the We charity. You know, there's never a dull moment in Canada. You might think we're a dull country, but $1 billion in patronage? You know, you would have to have $10 billion in the States. Ooh. Sorry, I don't want to mention Donald Trump. Have a good day. Bye.